Welcome back to the deep dive.
Yeah.
Today, we are going to do something a little bit different. We're
Yeah.
going to start by shattering a stereotype that I think, honestly, most of us have floating around in our heads. It is this cinematic image, this so sticky. I bet if I asked you to draw a counselor, you'd draw this exact scene.
It's good to be back, and I think I know exactly where you're going with this.
Yeah.
You're picturing the leather couch, aren't you?
I am. I'm picturing the couch, the quiet, dimly lit room with the Persian rug. There's a box of tissues on a mahogany side table.
Of course.
And the therapist, probably, a bearded guy with glasses, he's nodding silently while someone lies back, stares at the ceiling, and talks about their mother for 45 minutes.
Right.
That is the image of mental health counseling for about 99% of the population, right?
It definitely is. It's the Freud archetype. It's the Hollywood version. And, I mean, while that setting certainly exists, and it is important, if you hold on to that image as the only definition of counseling, you are missing, gosh, about 90% of the reality.
Exactly. So for this deep dive, we are digging into a fascinating source text. It's titled Clinical Mental Health Counselors' Work Settings by Ed Newkrug and Richie Kubelis. And let me tell you, if you think counseling is just about sitting in a chair asking, how does that make you feel? This is going to blow your mind.
It really is a paradigm shift.
We're talking about counselors working inside maximum security prisons, in corporate boardrooms, deciding the fate of millions of dollars in claims on military bases.
Active conflict zones, even.
Right. Inside hospital emergency rooms, and even get this working for insurance companies.
It really is a chameleon-like profession. That is the core argument of the source material.
Chameleon, I like that.
The authors make a really compelling case that the core skills of a counselor, empathy, diagnosis, assessment, active listening, they're applicable in almost every corner of society. But the context changes everything.
How so?
The environment you're in dictates how you use those tools. It's a completely different job.
And the author himself, Ed Newkrug, is practically the poster child for this chameleon nature. I was looking at his bio in the intro, and it's like reading the resume of 5 different people stuffed into one life.
It really is. He notes that throughout his career, he's been a crisis counselor, an outpatient therapist, a substance abuse counselor, a school consultant, a pastoral counselor, and a private practitioner.
So he's seen it all.
He has essentially lived the entire map of the profession we're about to explore. He's seen the profession from every possible angle.
So that is our mission today. We are going to take you on a tour of this landscape. We're going to look at the where and the how of counseling today. And we've got some incredible vignettes, real stories from professionals in the field that show just how high the stakes can get. We aren't just looking at job descriptions here. We're looking at the implications of these roles.
And we're going to uncover some surprising realities about how these systems work. I think it's so important to understand not just what a counselor does, but how the systems they work in prisons, hospitals, the military, how they shape the mental health of the people inside them.
So let's unpack this. We have to start with the foundation. If we go back in time, how did we get from, the old school asylums to where we are now? Because the source highlights a very specific turning point in history that basically invented the modern landscape.
It does. We have to look at 1963, specifically the Community Mental Health Centers Act.
Right.
This was signed into law by President John F. Kennedy. And to understand why this matters, you have to understand the atmosphere of the time. Prior to this, individuals with severe mental health issues were often housed rather than treated.
And housed is putting it politely, right? The source mentions these state institutions were often unsafe, overcrowded, and frankly, inhumane. The snake pit era.
Correct. They were focused on containment. Society didn't really know what to do with severe mental illness, so they locked it away.
Out of sight, out of mind.
Exactly. So Kennedy's vision and the vision of the Act was incredibly ambitious. It was a massive social experiment. The goal was to establish 1,500 community mental health centers, or CMHCs, across the country.
1,500. Wow.
And the idea was deinstitutionalization, moving treatment out of these isolated fortresses and into the local community.
The theory being that people heal better when they're near their families, their jobs, and their support networks, rather than being locked away in a facility 3 hours from home.
Exactly. It was all about integrating mental health into daily life, not separating it.
But 1,500 centers, That sounds like a massive infrastructure project. Did they pull it off?
Well, here is the reality gap, as the source calls it.
Mm.
The source notes that while the act did jumpstart the creation of many centers, and it successfully moved people out of the asylums, that goal of 1,500 fully funded centers was never actually reached.
Why not?
The funding proved to be much more difficult than anticipated. The money was supposed to shift from the state hospitals to the community centers, but a lot of it just, well, it just evaporated or was diverted.
Classic government projects, right? Great vision, complicated execution. So where does that leave us today?
It leaves us with what the authors call a patchwork. These centers exist, and they are vital. They are the safety net of the American mental health system, but they rely on this chaotic mix of funding.
Wait, what?
You have federal block grants, state budgets, local tax levies, Medicaid, Medicare, and then sliding scale fees from clients. It creates a complex, often resource-strained environment for the counselors working there.
And the clients. Who is walking through the doors of a CMHC today?
Everyone. That's the key distinction from private practice. In a private practice, you might have a niche, you work with anxiety or couples.
Right.
In a CMHC, the clientele is incredibly diverse. You have varying socioeconomic backgrounds, a wide range of diagnoses from mild anxiety to severe schizophrenia, and people from all walks of life.
So you have to be a generalist.
You do. This is why the source emphasizes that for a counselor in this setting, cultural competence isn't just a nice-to-have skill, it is the job.
And we have a perfect example of this in one of the vignettes. Let's talk about Liliana. She's a counselor who specifically felt a calling to work in this environment rather than, say, a posh private office.
Yes, Liliana's story is quite grounding. She mentions growing up in a minoritized community, so she saw the need for mental health services firsthand. She didn't want to go into a setting that felt exclusive. She wanted to work where the need was greatest.
What struck me about her profile was how she describes her approach. She uses a phrase that I think is really important, a systemic lens. Can we break that down? Because it sounds academic, but the implication is huge.
It is huge. When you work in a community setting, you realize very quickly that you cannot treat a patient in a vacuum. It's just not possible.
What do you mean?
If a client comes to Liliana with depression, she can't just look at their brain chemistry or their childhood. She has to look at the systems pressing down on them.
So things like poverty.
Are they facing poverty? Is there systemic racism? Do they have safe housing? Are they food insecure? All of these external factors.
Right. It's hard to use cognitive behavioral therapy to fix sadness if the root cause is that you're about to be evicted.
Precisely. That is the systemic lens. Liliana notes that the majority of her clients have been impacted by these societal systems and have experienced significant trauma because of them.
So her job is bigger than just therapy.
Much bigger. Her role involves intake assessments and crisis response, sure, but she's also acting as a behavioral health consultant. She's connecting the dots between the person's mental state and the brutal reality of the world they live in. She's advocating for them within those systems.
It sounds like incredibly demanding work, high volume, high acuity.
It is. It really is.
But then let's swing the pendulum to a completely different environment,
Yeah.
one that I think people don't associate with clinical mental health at all,
Okay.
career counseling.
This is a fascinating area. We often think of career counseling as just someone helping you fix your resume or pick a major.
Yeah, it feels very administrative,
Yeah,
like a guidance counselor.
right. But the source makes a strong case that this is deeply clinical work.
Yeah, I found that interesting. They actually call it the mental health of work. Why is that link so strong?
Well, think about it. Your occupational choices influence almost every aspect of your existence. Your income, your identity, your friend circle, where you live, your stress levels. We spend more time working than doing almost anything else. If your work life is misaligned with your personality or values, your mental health suffers. It's inevitable.
Yeah, it's so true. We've all had that job that made us miserable, and it doesn't stay at the office. It bleeds into your sleep, your marriage, your patience with your kids.
Exactly. And the source points out something I wasn't aware of. Clinical mental health counselors are actually more highly trained in career counseling than any other mental health professional.
Really? More than a psychologist?
Yes. It's a mandatory part of their accreditation standards, KA-CREP. Psychologists and social workers often don't get the same depth of training on vocational development.
So they have a competitive advantage there. And there's a vignette about Amber, who works in a university career center. She talks about this aha moment she had.
Right. She started out just interested in the counseling side, but during her internship, she realized you couldn't separate the two. She observed what she calls a bidirectional relationship.
Meaning it goes both ways.
Exactly. Personal issues impact professional goals, like a student who is failing classes because of anxiety and professional struggles cause personal distress. They feed each other.
She uses an intersectional framework, which sounds
Yeah.
like a fancy way of saying she looks at the whole person, their background, their identity, their dreams, not just their transcript.
Correct. For example, a first-generation college student faces a completely different set of pressures than a student whose parents are both doctors. The career choice isn't just about what do I like. It's about how do I support my family? Or do I even belong here? Amber helps them process that identity formation.
And interestingly enough, the source explicitly notes that this area of counseling can be quite lucrative.
It can. Corporations pay well for people who can help their employees function better, EAPs and things like that.
Always good to know. So we've got the community safety net and we've got the career strategists. Now, I want to move into what the outline calls high-stakes systems. And they don't get much higher stakes than this next one, corrections.
This is a heavy section. To set the context, we have to look at the numbers. The American criminal justice system holds approximately 2.3 million people in jails or prisons.
2.3 million.
And on top of that, another 4.1 million are on probation or parole.
That is the population of a small country. It's a staggering amount of people.
Yeah.
And the source mentions a statistic that really highlights the failure of the system, the rearrest rate.
Yes. 25% of people are rearrested within just 1 year of release.
A quarter of them.
And the source draws a direct line between that recidivism and untreated issues. Poverty, substance abuse, and mental illness. The prison population has grown by 500% since 1980. Effectively, prisons have become the largest mental health providers in the country, but they aren't designed for it at all.
So if you are a counselor in a prison, what are you actually doing? Are you just doing therapy in a cell?
It's much more complex than that. It's forensic work.
Yeah.
Yes, you might do individual or group therapy, but the role is so multifaceted, and of course, it's all dictated by security.
So what else?
You are writing sentencing reports that judges will use to decide a person's fate. You are testifying in court as an expert witness. You are handling crisis intervention when an inmate is potentially suicidal or violent.
And we have Kathleen, who works in a correctional facility. Her story really brings this to life. She talks about combining a passion for social justice with counseling.
Kathleen's perspective is vital because she points out the tragic irony of her job.
What's that?
For many of the individuals she sees, prison is the first time they have ever had access to care. Due to stigma, poverty, or lack of insurance in the outside world, they've never seen a therapist until they were incarcerated.
That is heartbreaking. You have to lose your freedom to find your mind.
It is. And Kathleen mentions using brief solution-focused sessions and CBT cognitive behavioral therapy.
Why those specifically?
In a prison environment, you often don't have years to do deep psychoanalysis. You might have them for 6 months. You need practical tools to help people manage their emotions and behaviors right now so they can survive the sentence and hopefully not come back.
She also mentioned something that I think would be intimidating for a lot of people. She responds to crisis situations and trains the other staff. You're animal working in a place designed for punishment, not comfort. It takes a specific kind of resilience to be the empathetic voice in a punitive system.
Absolutely. It's a tightrope walk every single day. And speaking of resilience and high-pressure environments, the military is another massive sector for counselors.
This section had some of the most devastating statistics in the entire text. We were talking about suicide rates.
Yes. The source cites research showing that over 30,000 active-duty military and veterans from post-9/11 wars have died by suicide.
30,000.
That number exceeds the number of combat deaths in those same conflicts. It is a quiet epidemic.
And the source lists the root causes. It's not just combat stress. It's a mix of things.
It is a perfect storm. You have high exposure to trauma, mental, physical, moral injury, and sexual trauma. But also, the source explicitly mentions the hegemonic masculine culture of the military.
Meaning a culture where showing weakness is forbidden, where you're supposed to just suck it up.
Exactly. A culture where you are trained to be invincible. So admitting you are depressed or anxious feels like a betrayal of your training. It feels like a failure.
Wow.
Plus, there is the stress of burnout, continued access to firearms, and the profound difficulty of reintegrating into civilian life.
That reintegration piece is huge. You go from a world of total structure, high adrenaline, and brotherhood to sitting in a quiet house in the suburbs where no one understands what you've seen.
Exactly. But there have been institutional changes. The system is trying to pivot. It's a slow process, but it's happening.
In what way?
The source notes that TRICARE, which is the major health insurer for the military, now reimburses counselors. And the VA, the Veterans Administration, has incorporated licensed professional counselors, or LPCs, into their system. This opens up a lot of doors for employment.
We have a vignette here from Donette. Her career path is fascinating because she's bounced around different parts of this government system.
Donette started in vocational rehabilitation, then moved to the Army National Guard as an education counselor. Now she's an EAP manager, that's Employee Assistance Program, on an Army installation.
She describes her role in a way I didn't expect. She says she acts as an educator, counselor, and marketing professional simultaneously. Why marketing?
That marketing piece is crucial. It goes back to the culture we just discussed.
The suck-it-up culture.
Right. In a military environment, the counselor can't just sit in the office and wait. Donette has to go out and market the idea of mental health. She has to convince soldiers and civilians that getting help is a strength, not a weakness. She serves both the DoD civilians and the service members, acting as a bridge to resources.
So we've covered the prison yard and the military base. Now let's go to the corporate office. This is part 3 of our journey, the corporate and medical intersection. And we have to talk about the alphabet soup of healthcare.
HMOs, PPOs, EAPs, the acronyms that rule our lives.
Okay, let's break these down quickly for the listener using an explain like I'm 5 approach because the source does a good job of defining them and it matters for the counselor's job.
Sure. Let's start with HMO, Health Maintenance Organization. Think restriction.
Okay.
You must use in-network doctors, and you usually require a referral from your primary care doctor to see a counselor. It's cheaper, but less flexible.
Got it. And PPOs.
Then you have PPOs, Preferred Provider Organizations. Think flexibility. You can go out of network, usually for a higher fee, and you don't always need a referral. More choice, more cost.
And EAPs are different.
EAPs are employee assistance programs. These are totally different. They are usually paid for by the employer as a benefit. They focus on wellness, productivity, and prevention.
So for short-term problems.
Right. If you're stressed at work or have a legal issue or a substance use concern, the EAP gives you a few free sessions to get stabilized. It's like a corporate safety net.
Okay, so that's the structure. But here's the curveball the source throws at us. Counselors aren't just providing the therapy in these systems, they are also the ones denying or approving the therapy.
Right. This is the role of utilization review, and it's controversial.
I can imagine.
Insurance companies hire clinical counselors to review the case notes of other clinicians to determine medical necessity.
This feels like a wolf in the hen house situation, or maybe the opposite. A counselor policing other counselors. It seems like it would be a very unpopular job.
It can feel that way. Many therapists view utilization review as the enemy, the person saying, no more sessions. But let's look at Reginald's vignette. He moved from being a direct family therapist to a utilization review manager at a Fortune 500 company.
And he doesn't seem to view it as policing?
No, he views it as quality control. He reframes it entirely. His job is to look at the data, the biopsychosocial assessment, and see if the requested level of care matches the clinical guidelines.
Can you give an example?
Sure. If a patient is severely suicidal, maybe they shouldn't be in once-a-week therapy. Maybe they need inpatient care. Or if someone has been in therapy for 10 years with no improvement, is that effective treatment or is it just maintaining?
So he's ensuring the right care is given, not just stopping care.
Exactly. He argues that this role is essential for making healthcare efficient and accessible. If resources are wasted on ineffective treatment, the whole system collapses and premiums skyrocket. He debunks the idea that these corporate roles are just paper pushing. He's using his clinical judgment every day, just on the other side of the phone.
It's a different way to help, ensuring the system has resources left for everyone. Now, closely related to this is integrated behavioral health, or IBH. This is when the counselor isn't in a separate office across town, but right there in the doctor's office.
This is a huge growth area, and honestly, it represents the future of medicine. The concept is warm handoffs.
Look, a warm handoff.
You see your primary care physician for diabetes or high blood pressure, and they notice you're anxious or non-compliant with meds, instead of giving you a card and hoping you call a therapist in 3 weeks.
Which people rarely do.
Right. Instead, they walk you down the hall to meet the counselor right then and there.
That seems so much more effective. It catches the person in the moment of vulnerability.
It is, but it changes the therapy. It's short-term, consultative. You aren't doing a deep dive into childhood trauma usually. You're helping a patient with diabetes manage the stress of their diagnosis so they can adhere to their medication.
Janelle's vignette touches on the friction here. She works in an ambulatory care clinic. She says she often felt misunderstood by the medical professionals.
That's a common challenge. It's a clash of cultures.
How so?
Doctors are trained in a biomedical model, find the pathology, fix the body, move to the next room. It's very fast-paced. Counselors are trained in a wellness model, process the emotion, take time.
Right.
Janelle had to constantly clarify her role, but she says she developed a passion for the mind-body connection. She had to learn to speak doctor, be concise, be data-driven, while staying true to being a counselor.
It's like being a translator between two worlds. Okay, let's move to part 4. We're calling this specialized populations, and the first one is a demographic that is growing fast: the elderly.
Gerontological settings, the silver tsunami. The source notes the rising population of those over 60. And with that comes very specific issues: loneliness, physical decline, grief, and facing one's own mortality.
And palliative care, right? Helping people at the very end of life.
Yes. And fighting stereotypes. The source mentions negative societal stereotypes about aging ageism. We often dismiss depression in older adults as just getting old. Counselors help older adults find meaning and dignity in that final chapter.
I loved Philip's story here. He's a gerontological counselor. He noticed a gap in play therapy. Now, usually when we hear play therapy, we think of toddlers with toys and sand trays.
Exactly. It seems counterintuitive. But Philip adapted this. He uses theraplay-informed interventions for older adults with neurocognitive disorders like dementia or Alzheimer's.
That is fascinating. Why play? What does that do?
Because when you have dementia, the cognitive brain, the part that uses language and logic, is deteriorating. But the emotional brain, the part that responds to touch, rhythm, and eye contact, is often still there.
So you're finding a different way in.
Philip uses simple, playful interactions to bypass the broken circuits and connect with the person inside. It's about creating moments of joy and connection when conversation is no longer possible.
That is incredibly innovative. It's about connection, not just conversation. Moving from age to ability. Let's talk about rehabilitation agencies.
Right.
Now, I want to be clear for the listener. The source distinguishes this from drug rehab. This is about physical and developmental disability.
Correct. The statistic here is that 26% of U.S. adults have a disability. Mobility issues, cognitive, sensory. The goal of rehabilitation counseling is independence and vocational aspiration.
Helping people get their lives back or build new ones.
Matthew is our guide here. He's a qualified rehabilitation consultant, or a QRC. He works primarily with people who have had work-related injuries.
So someone who maybe worked construction their whole life, got injured on the job, and now they can't do that anymore.
Right, and Matthew talks about the grief involved in that. It's not just find me a new job. It's I've lost my identity as a physical worker. If your body was your tool and your pride and now it's broken, that is a massive psychological blow.
It's a loss of self.
It is. Matthew helps them process that loss while also doing the practical work of medical management and vocational testing to find what they can do now.
It's that intersection of logistics and emotion again. Next up in this section, youth services. And the source takes us to a pretty intense setting here, a lockdown mental health facility.
This is Tiffany's vignette, and it is a stark reminder of the crisis our youth are facing. She works with kids ages 5 to 21.
5 years old. In a lockdown facility.
Yes. The acuity is incredibly high: suicidal thoughts, homicidal thoughts, sexual aggression. These are often court-ordered placements or severe safety situations where the child cannot be safe at home or school.
That's heavy.
Tiffany focuses on teaching conflict resolution and coping skills in a high-intensity environment. The source links this need to the rise in youth violence and adverse childhood experiences, or ACEs, things like abuse, neglect, and household dysfunction.
So she's on the front lines.
She's trying to interrupt the cycle of trauma before these kids end up in the adult prison system we talked about earlier.
That feels like a perfect segue into part 5, deep intensity. We're talking about substance abuse and residential treatment. The stats on overdose deaths are, well, they are horrifying.
They are. The source cites the CDC: 107,735 drug overdose deaths between July 2021 and July 2022.
That's a city.
It is a national emergency. It's more than the population of some cities wiped out in a single year.
And the comorbidity issue, that's a fancy word, but what does it mean in this context?
It means the dual diagnosis. 25% of adults with substance abuse issues also have a severe mental health problem. They go hand in hand.
One causes the other.
Often, people use drugs to self-medicate the pain of depression or trauma. You can't treat the addiction without treating the underlying mental health issue that fuels it. It's a vicious cycle.
We have to talk about Tony. His vignette was one of the most powerful for me. He's a former paramedic, firefighter, and U.S. Navy SEAL.
Talk about a resume. I mean, he has served in the most intense roles possible. But Tony is open about his own struggle. He dealt with PTSD and substance abuse after returning from service. He uses a very poetic phrase. He says he tasted the wrath of hopelessness.
And now he runs an intensive outpatient program for veterans and first responders.
And here is the key insight from Tony. He views his past challenges as attributes. His own trauma is the bridge that allows him to connect with his clients.
He's got credibility.
Instant credibility. When he sits across from a cop or a soldier, he's not talking down to them from a textbook. He's been there. He gets it. It creates a level of trust, a therapeutic alliance that is hard to replicate.
That peer-to-peer connection is gold. Now, residential treatment centers. These are live-in settings. Who is this for?
It's a catch-all for populations that need 24/7 support. The source mentions incarcerated individuals, people with eating disorders, developmental delays.
Lauren's story is about working with survivors of domestic violence and sex trafficking.
This is incredibly delicate work. Lauren mentions using advanced skills alongside basic empathy, but she also highlights something practical that I think gets overlooked: financial planning.
Financial planning. In a trauma center, that seems out of place.
It does at first, but think about the mechanism of abuse. Financial dependence is often the chain that binds a victim to an abuser.
Right. They have no way out.
If a survivor cannot function independently, if they can't manage money, open a bank account, or hold a job, they are at high risk of being trafficked again or returning to an abuser out of desperation.
So it's about breaking that cycle completely.
So Lauren combines deep trauma therapy with career counseling and financial literacy. It's holistic. It's about true freedom.
That is so smart. It's not just healing the heart. It's securing the future so they can stay free. Okay, we are heading into the final stretch of our tour. Part 6. Intimate settings. Faith, family, and private practice.
Let's start with couples and family. The source notes a shift here. This used to be the domain of social work, but now counselors are heavily involved.
And the divorce rate is still high. The source says 40%.
It is. And Letitia, a counselor in this field, talks about systems theory again.
We heard that with Liliana in the community center.
Right, and it applies here too. Whether she's treating one person or a couple, she looks at the family system. You can't change one part of a mobile without the whole thing moving. If you treat a child for behavioral issues but don't address the parent's failing marriage, the child is just going to go back into the chaos.
Then we have pastoral and religious settings. This is where things get ethically tricky.
It is the intersection of faith and professional ethics. The source raises a very specific, very provocative dilemma. A pro-life Christian counselor working with a client who wants an abortion.
That sounds like a minefield. How do they handle that?
The professional standard and what is taught in counselor education is to respect the client's right to choose. The counselor cannot impose their values on the client. It's about the client's autonomy.
So they have to put their personal beliefs aside.
Completely. If the counselor cannot be objective, they have an ethical duty to refer the client out. But ideally, they stay in the pocket and help the client process their decision, whatever it may be.
That requires a lot of discipline.
It does. Brittany, in her vignette, talks about bridging these worlds. She works with churches to destigmatize mental health. She views her work as integrating global health, spirituality, and service. She sees no contradiction. She sees a partnership between science and faith.
Finally, we arrive at the destination many students dream of: private practice. The autonomy, the flexible schedule, the couch we talked about at the beginning.
The dream. But the source throws a bucket of cold water on it too. It lists the cons: isolation, lack of immediate clients, the administrative burden of HIPAA, billing, and creating a professional will in case you get sick.
A professional will.
Yeah, a plan for what happens to your client files if something happens to you. It's a whole thing.
There's a reflection exercise mentioned where students opened a practice and just sat in an empty room because they didn't know how to market themselves.
Right.
It's a business. You have to be an entrepreneur as well as a clinician. You have to pay the rent, the electric bill, and for the tissues.
But when it works, it works. Victoria's vignette is poetry. She works in a 107-year-old wooden home.
That image stayed with me. She compares herself to the antique red oak timber beams of the house. She says she acts as a shock absorber for clients. She's created a sanctuary.
It's a beautiful image.
And for her, it was personal necessity. She moved from the high stress of child protective services, which burns people out fast, to this private practice to find balance for herself as a single mother.
It's a beautiful place to end the tour. From the razor wire of a prison to the red oak beams of a quiet office.
It really shows the incredible range of this field. It's just breathtaking, really.
So let's synthesize this. We've looked at dozens of settings.
Sure.
What is the common thread? What makes all of these people counselors?
The common thread is the skill set. Empathy, assessment, diagnosis, the ability to listen deeply. The source calls the clinical mental health counselor title a master key. It opens all these doors.
A master key.
The context changes. You might be wearing a suit in a boardroom, scrubs in a hospital, or jeans in a youth center. But the core work of connecting with another human being remains the same.
And here is a thought I want to leave the listener with. We saw Letitia mention her virtual practice. We saw the gig economy nature of private practice. But we also saw the massive institutional needs of the military and prisons.
Right. A real contrast.
In a world that feels increasingly fragmented, where we are all in our own bubbles, are counselors becoming the glue that holds these systems together. They are the ones moving between the doctor and the patient, the warden and the inmate, the employer and the employee.
That's a powerful way to look at it. They are the systemic connectors. They are the ones translating pain into language that these systems can understand and hopefully act on.
So next time you're at work or at the doctor's office or even reading about the criminal justice system, look for the counselor. They're probably there working in the background.
Hidden in plain sight.
Thanks for diving deep with us today. It's been quite a journey. We'll see you next time.